So bills going up today, a tough day, but at the same time, you want to point out that wages are going up as well.
Absolutely. So today, 3 million workers, relatively low-paid workers, will get the pay rise from the significant rise in the national minimum wage. On average, that's worth about £1,400 to those people a year. If you're 18 to 20 years of age, you will get one of the biggest increases in that age band there has ever been. So yes, any part of the year where bills get that annual uprating, that's difficult, but we are starting to deliver on living standards improving. We've seen that since the election. We've seen wages rise for the first time in real terms in a long time, more than the cost of inflation. And of course, alongside that change to the minimum wage, we've got the pensions triple lock, we've got the freeze on fuel duty, we've got the rollout of breakfast clubs, and of course, the cutting interest rates. So we know things are tough. We know what we've inherited, but we're starting to make that difference, and that's what the whole government's committed to.
The boost in national living wage and minimum wage, your own press release points out, affects 3 million people. Clearly, energy bills, water bills, council tax, broadband bills, TV licences affects all people.
Look, the fact that things are tough in Britain is not new. We know what we've inherited over the last 15 years. The point is our plan for change is about changing that, is about making the difference. Of course, for 3 million workers, and that's not a small number, people getting a substantial pay rise, that's important. But how we run the rest of the economy, particularly those cuts to interest rates, the freeze, for instance, on fuel duty, these are all things that contribute to the cost of goods and services and the wages and earning power that all of us have got. And we're starting to see the signs of real progress, a real change to what we've inherited.
Clearly, there's more to come in terms of the week ahead when the tax year itself switches, and we'll see national insurance contributions going up for businesses. Obviously, some changes for small businesses as it relates to inheritance tax as well. Are you hearing from businesses that there is an offsetting pressure, even if you're putting up wages in some areas, that there might be a pressure on jobs because of the changes you're putting on businesses?
Well, the jobs data has been incredibly robust. Some of the doom-mongers on the Conservative Party have been proved wrong, I think, so far on that.
But of course, the tax changes haven't come in yet.
Of course, we're cognizant of the aggregate impact of a whole range of government policies and, indeed, the global situation on firms. To mitigate that, that's why we had those changes to employment allowance in the budget. So for a lot of smaller businesses, that actually eases the pressure on their national insurance contributions, the bill that they pay before they even employ anyone at all. We've had, for instance, for small businesses, the commitment to freeze what's called the small business rate multiplier, so the rate at which you calculate business rates for smaller businesses, keeping that in place. We've got the commitment to long-term reform of business rates for retail, hospitality and leisure. So we're really aware of that. We're trying to mitigate that. Of course, no one wants anyone to have to be asked to pay more in tax. But, 5 months after the budget, I've heard no other political party put forward any plan to fill that black hole. That fell upon us to do that.
I don't know what that saves small business. I haven't even heard of the small business multiplier, but the national insurance hike is costing £40 billion. I think it's interesting, talking to the business secretary, no less, not to hear ever a point of view that these things do cost businesses. Is the whole cabinet unaware of the message coming from the business community?
That's not fair at all. I've given specific speeches where I have said, we know the ask of business has been significant. We know what that has meant.
Have you pushed back on some of these changes? Or is everyone united in the cabinet?
Of course, on this programme, coming on with a collective view of the cabinet. And look, I wish we hadn't inherited a situation where there was that black hole, where we had to go in the budget and ask for contributions to fill that. I wish that wasn't the start of a new government. But business understands sometimes you've got to make difficult decisions. Sometimes you've got to have things that you wouldn't ideally have to do. But, without that economic stability, would we have seen interest rates cut? Would we have been able to fund things that are essential to business and the British people? We could not have accepted what we inherited. The figures didn't add up. And again, 5 months after the budget, has anyone, I imagine, not come on this programme from, say, the Conservative Party and said what their plan was to fill that hole?
I mean, we could debate all day if we would have seen interest rates cut, and of course the number of cuts probably has come in less than people expected. But you can't claim credit for that and keep blaming the inheritance for why bills are going up. I mean, which is it? Do you sit here today as a government and take responsibility for the situation we're in?
Of course we do. But when you ask, why did you have to make difficult decisions early on, you know why that was. And we know it was absolutely plain as day, the situation that was inherited. What I'm very proud of is how we're reacting to that in difficult circumstances, seeing for the first time in a long time living standards, real living standards rise, wages rise faster than inflation, a whole set of policies designed to mitigate some of the pressures you're quite rightly articulating and fundamentally deliver the change that the government was elected to deliver.
I want to move on to tariffs in a second, but just to round off this part of the discussion, do you accept that it's possible that the NIC increase, for example, on businesses might hit employment in the year ahead once that tax change comes in? Is that something you'll be keeping an eye on?
Of course we keep an eye on that. And of course that is why, for instance, the changes to employment allowance were put in place to try and mitigate the impact, still recognising it's a big ask of business, mitigate the impact on smaller businesses. But of course we monitor that very, very carefully. But the overall pitch to business from this government, a return to political stability and openness to the rest of the world when there's a lot of pressures on that global system. The business environment improving through changes to regulation, to taxation, to some certainty being in place when there was none of that for the last few years. This is all crucial to providing the platform for business success.
Obviously, a lot of uncertainty coming from overseas. Disappointed that tariffs will be imposed? Can you confirm that they will tomorrow?
Look, we expect every country in the world to be subject to what the US is calling World Tariff Day. And I think the question, only the President himself will ultimately know what the plan in place will be. But we would expect that to affect every country, and then individual countries perhaps able to negotiate a resolution for themselves as part of that. I can tell you from the work that we have done, I don't believe there's any country in the world that is more engaged with the US, that has more of an opportunity to reach agreement. And I think that agreement isn't just about avoiding harm. I think there could be real gains for the UK in terms of access for our companies to the US. So of course, I want that to be in place. I think the trading relationship between the US and the UK is a good one, is a fair one. It's very balanced. So I think the basis for success is there.
So are you still hopeful that the tariffs that will arrive tomorrow will be reversed in weeks, in months?
I am. That would be my objective. Again, the decision on that ultimately lies with the President himself. I can't give a timescale on that, but of course, the longer we don't have a potential resolution to that, the more we will have to consider our own position in relation to that.
Including retaliatory tariffs?
I think we have to have all options available to us. I think that's reasonable. I have to take the steps that would give me the measures I need if I do need to take that action. But what British business is very clearly telling us is they support our calm-headed approach. They see we're engaged in the national interest to get a deal. And while the deal is possible, they want us to remain at the table.
Just finally on this topic, how hard has it been for you to negotiate? You've been meeting with Howard Lutnick, but you said at the top only the President really knows. Do you think he and his Treasury Secretary are kind of in the dark as much as you are?
Look, I have nothing but good things to say about my counterparts in the US, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and USTR Ambassador Jameson Greer. They've been engaged, they've been available to us. We've been able to have, I think, the kind of discussion which would usually take months or years in a relatively short space of time. So I'm incredibly grateful to them for their engagement. It's been very positive, but of course I want to see the resolution of those talks.
I wanted to ask quickly about British Steel. A lot has changed. We've just discussed some of it in the last few months, and the national interest comes into play perhaps in a way that we wouldn't have expected. Are you considering nationalising British Steel? Look,
I want an incredibly strong future for the whole of the steel sector in the UK. I think Scunthorpe and British Steel and Teesside are very important. It's the construction steel in particular which I want to see continue in the UK. That's why we've been so engaged. We put a very significant offer to the company in terms of a transformation deal going forward. We remain engaged with them, but I want that future for British Steel in the UK. So if they can't meet the deal as it stands and start to irreversibly, I guess, shut blast furnaces, would you consider nationalising them? We remain engaged with the company, and that's the right thing to do right now. I know for everyone who works for British Steel, it's a time of incredible uncertainty. I'll be frank, I think without a change of government, we might have lost the remainder of our steel industry entirely, because until this new government came with money on the table to co-invest, as other countries have done in their steel industry, I just don't think there was a future available to us. So I'm committed to that, and I remain engaged with the company. Probably not helpful to speculate on other things, to be frank, right now, but I want that future for steel in the UK. No, I totally get it. It's business sensitive, but I guess a final way of putting it, blast furnaces will remain operational in this country. I believe that's the case. There's not a long-term future for the two blast furnaces left in Scunthorpe. There's a natural life to blast furnaces, you will know, and ultimately there's got to be a transition at some point to new technology, whichever one we choose to go with in the UK, and we've got some work undergoing with the department around that. But there's no problem with blast furnaces remaining open, except that, of course, in Scunthorpe right now, they lose a lot of money, and that's the pressure on the company. There's no other pressure determining that decision. If we can fix that situation, or at least get to a position that goes us into a transition, I'd love to see that. But at the minute, the uncertainty, I know, is something of huge concern to the workforce in the local area.
Business Secretary, thanks for joining us. Good to see you. Jonathan Reynolds.